turns ballistic.
Smashing your house?
Homewrecker. But who needs a single bulldozer when an entire town is turning on this couple, harassing them with car horns 24/7?
We're being tortured.
But why?
Just trying to make our town look like a bunch of idiots.
Honking mad. Plus, squatters taking over mansions.
My house has turned into a battleground.
And it's legal. You can't get them out. Meet the guy who's in control of taking control.
So you have primary control of the earth?
Correct.
That seems like a lot of power.
Finders keepers. And battleground dog droppings. Who's left holding the bag and then throwing it in the neighbor's yard? The town mayor.
We've been trying to get in contact with you about the whole dog poop thing.
Poopgate.
I gotta watch all of this.
Tonight, do you have neighbors from hell?
It's like a movie scene. A truck flattened like a pancake. He didn't care.
In the annals of neighborhood mayhem, it doesn't get much crazier than this.
Unbelievable.
There's somebody on a tractor on Pioneer! Oh my gosh! I can't understand you when you're screaming.
He's smashing my house.
Smashing your house? Then it's your neighbor? I'm getting
Neighbors terrorized by a bully in a bulldozer.
I was afraid I was going to die. I'm glad we're both alive.
Dan and Mary Davis and Barb Porter are retirees who came to Port Angeles, Washington, looking for a bit of paradise.
Why did you want to move here?
Oh, it's a beautiful place to live.
And we like to fish, and the water's right here.
Clinging to the northern shore of the Olympic Peninsula, this town of 20,000 is a pit stop for giant oil tankers and a port of call for lumbermen and fishermen. More recently, the place has served as a scruffy setting for the mega-hit movie Twilight. But before we meet the neighbor from the dark side, let's trace his path of destruction, beginning with a vacant modular home Dan was building as a rental unit.
This is where my house sat.
And this is where it wound up, next door.
He shoved my house through the fence, collapsed both their storage buildings.
It was way over there, and it ended up here. And that's my house there.
He's headed towards this small house here, and it looks to me like he destroyed that house.
To say nothing of Dan's pickup truck, which in the end could have been carried away with a spatula. All of this courtesy of a bulldozer driven by a very angry logger, their neighbor, Barry Sweigel. I talked with his brother, Jeff.
Barry's actually an easygoing guy.
I'm almost smiling just because of the juxtaposition of, I'm picturing him up on the dozer, knocking down houses as an easygoing guy. So I'm trying to get my head wrapped around that.
Well, I guess things change, you know. If somebody makes you mad enough, you snap. You do things you probably regret.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened here. He snapped.
Long before Barry snapped, crackled, and popped his way through this neighborhood, a fella down in Colorado climbed in an armor-clad bulldozer in 2004 and laid waste to a good chunk of the town of Granby. When the dozer's engine finally died, the man killed himself. Miraculously, up here in Port Angeles, no one was injured in Barry's wrecking spree. But what set him off?
What do you think was his big gripe?
It really boils down to one of the neighbors, and that's Dan Davis. Barry kept telling me that Dan was pissing him off, doing little things to get him mad.
They say good fences make good neighbors. Well, not in this case. It seems Mr. Davis had been trying to build a fence between his property and Barry Swiegel's driveway.
Well, how far back did that go?
Well, that goes back for years over that fence up there.
I think he wanted something that didn't belong to him. And he was mad because we were fixing it.
Property lines are the most heated dispute between neighbors because people believe in lines, and yet both neighbors believe the line is different.
Real estate mogul Barbara Corcoran has seen so many of these disputes spin out of control, she should be given a permanent seat on the UN Security Council.
It takes two to fight, okay? And if either of them had been intelligent, the whole thing could have not happened.
Taking the long view, as in from outer space, there's Dan's property, and adjacent to it, Barry's driveway. You can see how Barry's trucks and heavy equipment wore a path across the corner of Dan's property.
Barry had logging equipment. His only way in and out was through this road.
Oh, yeah.
So you need a pretty good size entrance to make the turn.
Make the corner.
With the fence up, you're going to have to drive a little bit slower. You can do it just fine, but you got to go slower.
He'd knock it down, we'd go put it back. He'd knock it down, we'd go put it back.
Now, Dan Davis was not about to be intimidated, but he's 75 with a bum knee and bad eyesight. By contrast, Barry Sweigel is a 245-pound Paul Bunyan in love with machinery. Instead of Babe the Blue Ox, rusting carcasses of his old toys line his driveway.
If you knew Barry, you know, he's a big boy.
Auto glass repairman Jason Bondi.
So, you know, I'm 300 pounds, and I'd be kind of scared of him if he went sideways.
Sideways, backwards, inside or out, Jason says there was something else that made Barry dangerous.
He didn't know me from Adam and just flat out said that he had a meth problem, you know, and he's trying to get help and nobody will help him.
Both Barry's brother and local authorities confirmed Barry had a history of drug use and a penchant for paranoia.
He said we were the leaders of a gang that was coming through our property and
stealing his fuel,
stealing
his
his
batteries,
fuel and his batteries.
He thought that this mobile home had them surveilling him in there. The government or somebody was watching him.
Even law enforcement had a growing file on the odd fellow living at 2313 East Ryan Drive.
He was out here with his backhoe, with his excavator, digging up his yard and digging 20-foot deep holes in this driveway right behind us.
He was just digging up holes?
Just digging holes.
Barry's bizarre brew of anger, heavy machines, and paranoia finally came to a full boil on an otherwise beautiful morning last May, when he turned his attention back to his neighbor Dan and that fence of his.
He was saying something I couldn't understand him, and he was just bouncing up and down, giving me the finger. Well, first time in my life I ever did it, I gave him the finger back. And he drove off. And then I called the sheriff.
Communication, Susan?
Yeah, Susan. My name is Dan Davis.
I says, well, something's going to happen here. I says, Barry's been tearing our fence down for 10 to 12 years, and I think he's going to do it again.
He just drove by here, and he just harassed the hell out of me.
About 2.5 hours later, then basically things hit the fan.
He's smashing my house.
Smashing your house?
When we come back, forget the fence, he's going to try to take out the whole neighborhood.
Yeah, now he's tearing the neighbor's place down.
Holy Jesus, I gotta watch all of this.
You will too, next.
Neighbors from Hell continues.
Dan Davis and his neighbor Barry Sweigel have been skirmishing over this fence for years.
He'd knock it down, we'd go put it back. He'd knock it down, we'd go put it back.
So like a run-up to a miniature war, Dan drew his red line in the sand, literally with spray paint, rightly guessing the squabble was about to turn nuclear.
So I drove down to Rite Aid, got 2 disposable cameras, came back because I just had the feeling he was going to do something.
Dan's no photographer. In fact, he's all thumbs, but still managed to fire off these shots just as Barry's dozer is about to take its first bite.
And I heard the bulldozer start. He was coming up our fence line, and immediately he started tearing out my retainer wall. He took my fence out up to this point, and I thought that's exactly where he was going to stop, but he didn't.
Oh no, Barry is just getting started. And his thirst for destruction is not likely to be quenched, especially with a 30-pack of cold beer riding shotgun in the dozer.
What shocked me was when that house started moving, it was, and I, look, something like that gets my curiosity up, and I'm interested.
Who wouldn't be? And thanks to a neighbor's cell phone video, we have your exclusive ringside seats to Barry's Rumble in the Rubble. Watch this.
He's smashing my house.
Smashing your house?
My house. He's smashing.
And listen to this 911 call. Dan's doing play-by-play of his own catastrophe.
Now he's back and running over my truck, right over my new diesel pickup, right over the top of it.
It was a hell of a nice pickup. And when I seen him go over that truck, holy Jesus, I gotta watch all of this, you know.
The method to this madness suggests Barry is nothing if not thorough. Demolish house? Check. Crush pickup? Check. Up next, the power poles.
You better get some cops up here with some guns, because this son of a gun is crazy.
911 emergency.
Somebody hit the pole.
Somebody did what? I'm sorry, the power line?
People walking around.
What a crazy! They should shoot that!
Somebody is gonna shoot him.
Where's the cops?
By the time sheriff's deputies scream onto Ryan Drive, the electric lines have been flash dancing with 115,000 volts. By now, the whole neighborhood is in a panic, and with very good reason.
I can't understand you when you're screaming.
Like a crazed stormtrooper, Barry has suddenly changed targets, blasting through several backyards and fences on his way to demolishing 2 more neighborhood homes.
Yeah, now he's tearing the neighbor's place down.
After punching a hole in the side of the 3rd house, he takes aim at the main residence of Dan and Mary Davis, where Mary is napping, dozing as it were, on a sofa.
I was inside, right behind this window almost.
What once was a window.
Yeah. And I kept hearing the noise louder and louder, but I was, about half asleep. And my dog was acting funny.
Ernie had every right to feel a little peculiar. All hell's breaking loose out there. Mary's bedroom takes a direct hit.
And I see a lady standing in the doorway, and I'm just like screaming on the top of my lungs, like freaking out. Get out of the house! Get out of the house!
Next, Barry takes out Mary's office and the living room where she'd been sleeping. On foot now, deputies Curtani and Backus race to catch up.
We were ramped up. There's no 2 ways about it.
And the information we're getting
yeah,
about what we're potentially dealing with.
Screaming at us to shoot him.
Did you have your guns up on him? I had my gun aimed at him, and I got his attention by waving my free hand. Yeah. He looked, and he immediately surrendered.
Barry was booked on charges of malicious mischief, burglary, and assault with a bulldozer, which, by the way, sits in a chain-linked jail of its own, seized as evidence, but a tad too big for the sheriff's weapons lockup.
I think this was my first ever bulldozer as a weapon of choice case.
For more than a year, Mr. Sweigel shuffled between jail, court, and a psychiatric hospital. Finally, 3 months ago, he pled guilty to 7 counts of first-degree malicious mischief and 3 counts of reckless endangerment. He apologized and was sentenced to 29 months in a state prison. With time served and time off for good behavior, he will be released next month. And guess who's none too happy about that?
I'll tell you, our justice stinks.
These days, Dan Davis has the look of a man whose dog just died. In fact, Ernie passed away a few months back. Mary is housebound with health problems.
My wife is 76 years old. I'll be 76 in September. And here that butthead is getting his meals cooked, his beds made, his clothes washed.
The bulldozed buildings have been replaced and the wreckage of last year removed. But the Davis home had to be rebuilt from the foundation up. And it's still not ready for them to move in.
We feel that we've been incarcerated longer than that man has for the sentence that he got for the damage he done to us.
I think the system's kind of screwy. I think he should be struggling. We should be sitting on the gravy train like he is.
Still, a restraining order will keep Barry from returning to his home for at least 10 years. Most of the old equipment and antiques are gone, except for this logging skidder, a hulking reminder of what one angry man and one big dozer can do.
And it's quick and it's loud and it's noisy. And every time his brother started it up, it scared the crap out of me.
As for the final tally of damages, it runs like this. Pickup truck, $40,000. Tractor, $16,000. Boat, $8,000. Various homes and buildings, $300,000. Images of Barry's neighborhood block party, priceless.
Next, There goes the neighborhood.
Squatters. They're just defiant.
Squatters taking over mansions for free. It's legal, and this guy is teaching them how.
Are you saying that you have some sort of papal authority here in North America?
In the globe.
When Neighbors from Hell returns. We return to Neighbors from Hell.
What happens if your new neighbor just won't leave? They move in but refuse to move out.
They still refuse to leave.
Becoming a squatter from hell.
My house has turned into a battleground.
What a mess, right?
Like the recent Airbnb house guest in Palm Springs.
A squatter nightmare. She says the guy who rented it won't leave.
But if you want to hear what may be the craziest, most outrageous squatter story, you gotta go to Boca Raton, Florida, a city synonymous with conspicuous consumption, designer clothing, designer dogs, and bombastic boats. Welcome to the aptly named Golden Harbor Drive, where everybody's backyard is right on the water. Rocking the infinity pool. Pretty good look. It is a Tony enclave that not long ago played reluctant host to a strange and uninvited guest.
This is it right here. Yeah.
Mike Avram lives here and notices something odd transpiring at a house on his block.
This is a sweet house.
It is a $2.3 million, 7,500 square foot plus-size palace. The previous owner had money problems, signed it over to Bank of America, and moved out. Now, a stranger is moving in without paying a penny to the bank, and he's not alone. A bunch of guys pull up and move into this beautiful house and tell you they are establishing an embassy.
An embassy for their mission.
Their religious
ministry.
mission.
Yeah, and they're going to have transient families coming in and out in accord with their ministry.
And your response to this was?
I don't think that's going to fly.
It gets even weirder quickly. The new occupant posts paperwork on the house saying nobody can enter without an invitation and 2 types of ID. On the elaborate forms, the name of the man who now claims ownership, Andre Barbosa. Neighbors Google him right away, and up pops the Facebook page of a 23-year-old Brazilian, an aspiring hip-hop artist who calls himself Loki Boy after the Norse god of mischief. That is when neighbors call 911.
They've changed the locks, they put a no trespassing sign out, and they're moving in.
All right, I'm going to have an officer dispatch as soon as possible.
Call the police on these right here. Squatters. They're just defiant.
The cops show up and speak to Loki Boy, who you can see right there on a neighbor's cell phone video. But here's where what seems like a clear-cut trespassing case gets truly crazy. Loki Boy presents the police with this document, which stops them in their tracks. Loki Boy is claiming something called adverse possession.
The notion is that someone can move on to a property, fix it up, take care of it, and after a period of time, it's their property.
It is an obscure but very real law that is on the books in all 50 states. If Loki Boy stays for 7 years, the mansion is his. So this kid was pretty clever because he was using language that was very confusing for you and your force.
Absolutely.
Thus begins a bizarre stalemate, with Loki Boy occupying the house day after day. Police, prosecutors, and the bank are in a state of confusion and paralysis, which is a lucky break for Loki Boy, who meanwhile is living large, working on a new rap video with the mansion as a backdrop. Was that frustrating for you?
Very.
More than 4 weeks into this thing, Lynn Houston, a nervous next-door neighbor, has had enough of this squatter from hell.
I was going to do anything to get rid of him. Anything.
You were willing to buy that house?
Yes.
You were going to take out a mortgage?
No.
Just pay cash?
Yes.
Pay cash for this house to get this kid out?
Yes.
Neighbors outraged to find out.
When her phone calls to the bank are not returned, she alerts the media.
Hard to believe, but true story out of Florida.
The nervous neighbor is convinced that the nightmare here on Golden Harbor Drive is connected to something much larger.
I believe there's somebody much more important, much higher, much wealthier behind him. Don't know who.
We decide to do some digging. Remember those weird documents Loki Boy posted on the front of the house? There is another name on there, James McBride, who, as we learn, is the founder of a mysterious group called Divine Province.
Can take back all this property that has been taken from us.
McBride is an ex-con who's done time for cocaine importation and run-ins with the IRS. He says he hasn't paid federal income taxes in 26 years and claims he can teach you how to live like him. McBride is very suspicious of the media, but he agrees to speak exclusively with ABC News. What is your connection to Andre?
He's a member of the Divine Province.
He says he didn't know in advance about Loki Boy's mansion takeover, but he now supports him fully. It's lawful to move into a house that's not yours and say, this is mine.
Correct.
But there are many other laws McBride feels he and his followers are not subject to. How? He shows me a seal he says was a gift from Pope Benedict himself. What can you do with this?
It means I can now give orders or issue decrees that the Vatican and the Roman Curia must follow.
Are you saying that you have some sort of papal authority here in North America?
In the globe.
In the globe?
Correct.
So you have primary control of the earth?
Correct.
That seems like a lot of power.
I understand, it is. And a lot of responsibility.
This may sound ridiculous, but the FBI is not laughing. There are an estimated 300,000 people in this country who share some version of McBride's belief that American laws do not apply to them. Some of these people are using tactics like adverse possession to take over vacant homes.
Why did you decide on this house? Why not? It's a beautiful house.
Meanwhile, back on Golden Harbor Drive,
Some people aren't sleeping, some people can't eat.
with media attention reaching a fever pitch, the cops mount a raid.
We showed up here, opened the door, walked in, no one's here.
They haul away Loki Boy's stuff and change the locks. 51 days after it began, the nightmare on Golden Harbor Drive ends with a whimper. Loki's house of cards has tumbled down. He has sneaked off quietly. I don't wanna let you go. And the mansion has now been sold legally to this guy, Zev Freitas, a successful Boca Raton realtor.
I live with my 2 children, my daughter Amy and my son Aaron.
And what about the squatters?
So I knew that this was the house that had the squatters, but that was about it. I don't think it affected the value of the property.
Zev's purchase brings a huge sigh of relief to neighbors like Becky Davis.
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
How are you? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. You know how infamous your house is, don't you?
I know, well.
The neighborhood was very, very frightened. Loki Boy was just scary because we didn't know anything about him.
And remember James McBride, leader of Divine Province? He recently learned the hard way that he is, in fact, subject to the law. Just last week, among other things, he was convicted of impersonating a diplomat, and he's most likely going back to prison.
I think the whole neighborhood feels safer.
If anything good has come out of this ordeal, the neighbors say it's that they've grown much closer. Here they are throwing a victory celebration over the eviction of the squatter from hell, complete with a surprise guest.
Okay, Loki, come on out.
A Loki Boy impersonator.
Next, why are all these cars honking their horns non-stop? A policeman, a fireman, even the mortician. Because of this man and his battle to buy this house.
It's called menacing by stalking.
Driving him out or just driving him nuts? When Neighbors from Hell returns. Neighbors from Hell continues.
Of all the homes in Hubbard, Ohio, it might be the last one you'd expect folks to fight over. But this vacant house on East Liberty Street is the hottest property since good old Nehemiah Hubbard founded the town 200 years ago. Oh, what a fuss over a little fixer-upper.
This all started in 2007 over a simple real estate deal, correct?
Right. It was the property next door here.
Meet Rick and Cindy Kurlich, longtime Hubbard residents. They say all they wanted was to buy the property next door. The only problem? It wasn't for sale. These folks, John and Marlene Clementi, had inherited half the house. The other half was tied up in court, but Rick Kurlich tried to buy it anyway, even though it had been in the Clementi family for generations.
I says, well, you're not getting my land. And I said, that's not right. It's my family since 1922. How could you do that?
The Clement family called me up and they told me to take my bid off the table. And if I didn't take my bid off the table, we'd be bitter enemies for life.
Rick never got the house, but he says he's still paying for what he did. As the town fire chief, Clementi had lots of friends, and suddenly Rick and Cindy say it seemed like every single one of them was driving by honking the horn, and it wasn't to say hello.
The Clement family conspired together to organize a horn-blowing campaign against us. That's really what this is all about.
Ask not for whom the horn blows, it blows for Rick and Cindy Kurlich.
In the beginning, it was 100 times a day.
100 times a day.
100.
So they began planning their payback. Their house now bristles with expensive surveillance cameras. As we were looking them over, just watch what happened.
The last camera is down here on the tree.
Okay. Oh, somebody just honked their horn. Did you hear that?
Yeah, it's never
Was that
ending.
a friendly honk?
Probably not.
Okay.
Rick says his ear is now finely attuned.
Do certain makes and models have a particular sound?
Yes. You can tell an import horn from a domestic horn.
Who are these horn blowers? Not just people in the town, but people who work for the town. Firefighters, including some from the department John Clementi ran, and police. Here's one of Hubbard Township's finest, not serving, not protecting, just honking. It's enough to wake the dead. This hearse caught 10 times. And would you look at this? The horn on the bus goes. An education for Hubbard's next generation of horn blowers. Rick and Cindy renamed their dining room the evidence room.
Wow.
There's more in the basement.
There's hundreds and hundreds of photographs and discs and stuff here.
You're like a detective. So when did people start blowing the horns? Were you recruiting people, telling them to get this guy out of town?
That's what he tells everybody.
John says he can explain everything. His son's girlfriend and some of her friends would occasionally blow the horn, but he says that was just their way of saying goodbye.
When they would leave the house, the girls would toot the horn just to let them know they're leaving.
A little toot? Yeah, Rick says, like this car leaving the Clementi's driveway at 4 in the morning.
Does the city of Hubbard have a horn-blowing epidemic?
An epidemic? No. We do have a problem in one particular area.
We patrolled around town with the police chief, Jim Tafe.
At some point, people began blowing horns, but it became clear at another point that on occasion it was used to harass the person who lived there.
Kurlich began taking horn blowers to court. He says he got orders of protection against more than a dozen people, and he didn't stop there. He started suing. Somebody beeps, Rick sues. Beep, sue. At the Trumbull County Courthouse, the legal paperwork is piling up. Rick is now suing no fewer than 40 alleged hornblowers, including the Clementis.
This isn't my job, and I don't want to do this, and I'm sad that I have to.
Kurlich versus everybody.
It seems like the town of Hubbard is against the Kurliches, and everybody's in on it now.
Why wouldn't you be against them?
If you beep your horn one time, he'll take you to court. Just a regular beep.
Does the city of Hubbard want the Kurliches to leave?
I believe so.
Do you think you've made matters worse?
We don't know how else to stop it.
We knew it was a long shot, but we asked both sides if they would consider mediation.
We would love it for it to stop, but how do you get everybody in Hubbard to come to a meeting and say stop?
Now there's a thought, get everybody in Hubbard to come to a meeting.
I I don't know.
Oh, yeah, Rick, that's just what we're gonna do. It's the 2020 Barbecue Peace Summit.
Yeah, all right.
But will the warring parties or anyone else bother to show up? Find out when we come back.
We return to Neighbors from Hell.
Which is the real Hubbard, Ohio, the peaceful city that claims to be the official home of the nicest people? Or the horn-blowing bedlam captured on Rick and Cindy Kurlich's surveillance cameras?
This is some stalking.
Has it become a living hell for you?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely.
They say horn-blowing bullies are ruining their lives.
How do you get out of the situation?
We really don't know.
Former Judge Billy Columbaro says she knows how it might be solved.
Well, we're on our way to see Mr. Karolich and Cindy.
On a gray and rainy Friday, she came to Hubbard to try to mediate the noisy feud. The minivan diplomacy begins at the Kurliches.
Hello.
Hi there.
I'm Rick.
The judge says mediation has a better chance without cameras.
All right, guys, you can leave. Out of here.
3 hours later, Judge Billy emerges with a slice of coconut cake, but no deal.
He's thinking about it. That's a good first step.
Next up, the Clementis, the people Rick and Cindy say organized the horn-blowing harassment in the first place.
Hi.
Another marathon session, but at the end of the day,
My assessment is they're just not ready for mediation at this point.
it looks pretty hopeless. But the next day, clear skies and a new plan. 2020 throwing a peace and reconciliation barbecue, complete with banners, balloons, and burgers. We even hired a classical guitar quartet and an a cappella group, hoping their harmonies will inspire.
We all just arrived on the scene. We got about an hour before everyone starts arriving.
We've invited the entire town with full-page newspaper ads. It was a big story.
A national news magazine is back in the Valley today trying to help resolve the horn-honking harassment case in Hubbard.
Cheeseburger's ready. Who had the cheeseburger?
There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You think we're going to come to a happy medium over hot dogs and hamburgers today?
We sure hope so.
It's between two people, and the whole city's involved.
Yeah. Now it makes us all look like idiots.
We do want to welcome you to the Hubbard, Ohio Peace and Reconciliation Barbecue.
The big question, the Clementis and the Kurliches. If they don't show up, the Peace and Reconciliation Barbecue is a bust. We heard conflicting reports. They were coming, they weren't coming. And then, surprise, suddenly there they were, John and Marlene Clementi. And then we got word Rick and Cindy Kurlich were on their way.
I think it's a little bit overwhelming, I think, for both of us.
And there they were, in the same place at the same time for the first time in years. Not counting courtrooms.
Are you nervous?
Well, we don't know who's here. We'll see what happens.
For a moment, we thought we had a breakthrough. The Kurlich's representative, Vic Rubenstein, confronts the Clementi's attorney, Jim Wise, insisting they go ahead with mediation.
Can we hear that from Mr. Clementi's mouth? He's ready to mediate?
My clients have always been willing to mediate.
Well, then let's get it on.
But is he willing to compromise?
That is up to him. I can't answer that.
First and foremost,
the lawyers for both sides made brief statements, but the Kurliches and Clementis themselves spent the Peace and Reconciliation Barbecue avoiding each other. Here are John and Marlene. Rick and Cindy are way over there. But we did accomplish this. We got people talking and, better yet, listening.
We had drivers driving past my house, beeping at this man's truck and us standing in my drive, enjoying my son's birthday party.
That story brought Kelsey back to the microphone.
If somebody drives past your house and honks at somebody's car at your son's party, we can all feel for that.
It's just a bad. And there was this moment when Rick's mom got a little overwhelmed.
It has been hell for 7 years for my son and his wife, and they're good people.
A neighbor who came to complain ended up showing compassion.
Well, let's hope it's all stopped.
I hope it stops.
Stop.
We just don't like what happened.
I know.
So maybe this wasn't the end, but it sure felt like a new beginning.
Next, neighbors and their weapons of revenge, tossing dog poop.
I can go chuck some poo.
And getting back at noisemakers with noise of their own.
I don't know if this is going to help any, but it's going to at least make me feel better.
When Neighbors from Hell returns. Neighbors from Hell continues.
Neighbors. You can't choose them, and judging by a quick trawl of YouTube, there are a whole lot of neighbors from hell out there. Even in the most genteel surroundings, like here in sleepy, sunny San Marino, California, neighborly relations can explode.
In this country, when someone puts shit on your doorstep, they're telling you what they think of you.
That's what happened, and it's dirtied the name of San Marino.
When they think of San Marino, they're going to think of the poop zone.
Watch the security camera evidence. A man picks up a bag of dog poop, not from his own dog, it was just lying on the sidewalk, and flings that feces onto a neighbor's doorstep.
I was stunned. This is shocking to the whole community.
Because the man caught on camera lobbing that little numero duo, none other than the man in the big chair. It's the mayor.
What's now become known as Poopgate.
And Mayor Dennis Neer has gone the way of Nixon. He resigned.
We've been trying to get in contact with you about the whole dog poop thing.
Well, I haven't gotten any messages, and I'm really busy now.
This is my least favorite part of the job. He's just woken up.
Are you a psychologist?
I'm not.
And neither am I. And I can't answer your question other than to say it was a mistake. I was tired in the time that I did it. It was a mistake.
Dr. Ari Novick is a psychologist and anger management expert.
We all have made judgment errors.
He said he was tired.
Okay, and that's quite possible. And certainly sleep deprivation can do that. But there's never an excuse for throwing feces on your neighbor's yard.
The neighbor in question is this guy.
He says, it got a little bit heavy and I decided to drop it. And this little bag was less than half, a pound.
Small dog.
It was a small dog.
Philip Lau is a regular thorn in the ex-mayor's side, now making political capital out of projectile poop to stop Mayor Neer's agenda in its tracks.
He's proposing painting bike lanes along the road. We had fought against the tennis lights.
So you are a concerned citizen, not a pain in the butt.
That's what I would think,
Lau thinks this was an act of vengeance.
Did you have a beef with Mr. Lau, or nothing?
No. Well, we have disagreements in terms of he comes to the city council and he objects to two things.
Has it ever crossed your mind to throw dog poop at his house?
Yes. I mean, when I saw the video, but my wife talked me out of it.
If you live in a city, chances are you have a neighbor from hell nearby somewhere. Comedian Hal Sparks, he has one.
I have a neighbor who has a tree, a gooey, sappy tree with white fluff that it's like tars and feathers, my house. Your neighborhood is a family you didn't choose.
But these days, security cameras like Mr. Lau's make it much harder for those nasty neighbors to get away with it. Steve Miller lives in posh Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. One day, he noticed a bag of dog poop on a bush in his manicured front yard.
And I noticed there was another